edition of the Amish Hour. Going to do a little bit different than I planned on today. Actually, 2 steps different from what I planned on, based upon a couple of things. I had been planning on doing the next segment on a deep dive into the more scientific side of DNA. That's still on the agenda, but I think given that this last episode got so much attention, seemed to get so many more new viewers, I should maybe do at least one more session kind of giving you the background in case you're too lazy to go through the hundreds of other podcasts I've done that tell other parts of the story. Okay, so what do we have here? As usual, I like to get the art AI to help me out with background images. This background image you see behind you was generated by the following prompt. Let's see, come on, show it to me. Annunaki Elohim Tag Team Scripture Wrestling. Now, what are we talking about there? Well, let's see what we got. Actually, that was kind of inspired this morning. There happened to be a special challenge going on Night Cafe about calligraphy. And so I hadn't planned on mentioning scripture wrestling. I was going to call it mud wrestling. But to make it give me some calligraphic connection so I could enter the contest, I added that. But what I'm talking about here, and it's going to be very interesting. I'm only showing you one of the images it gave me because the others were kind of shit. But if you know much about wrestling, you know that there's different forms of wrestling. Different numbers of players in the ring. There is, your traditional one-on-one wrestling, which is actually a 3-way match, isn't it? The umpire, the referee, is kind of a third. And to some people's way of thinking, the gal that carries the cards in the skimpy bikini and before the fight, or between fights, is also part of the cast of a wrestling match, as is the announcer that's announcing the next fight. So it's a much more complicated social interaction than you think. Tag team wrestling adds another dimension to the sport of having what's supposed to be a partner that you can go to your corner and tag, and then they take over for you. Only sometimes the one who is supposed to take over doesn't want to take over, and sometimes they come in and the one who tagged them stays in the match and they beat the crap out of the other wrestler. So it's an interesting visual meme for what we're going to talk about today. Why scripture wrestling? Well, you'll understand that when I get into the details of this talk, because contrary to popular fiction, scriptures change. They're not written by gods, or even if they are, they get corrupted by very ungodly characters who want to use and abuse the Word of God. Okay, so before anybody gets offended one way or another, just accept that happens. You know it happens. You're seeing it happen all around you ever since you were born. And the older you are, the more aware of it you are. It is called cultural Marxism. It is basically changing cultural memes, cultural norms, using narratives that are corrupted. A lot of my channel is about that. Different instances of that. And, the last segment about the ob things is an example, a good thread that you can use to track cultural Marxism throughout the history of written language in our species. Okay, so what am I going to call this one? The title of this talk is The Truth About the Annunaki Elohim and the Nephelim Genocide. Where is that coming from? If you are one of the people that is spiritually curious or scientifically curious enough about what's going on today to not buy the standard narrative that you're being told from either camp, one of the directions that many people are exploring that kind of appeals to both camps is the idea of ancient aliens. And you've got some versions of that camp who are saying that, you know, the characters mentioned in the Bible, in the Vedas, in the Sumerian Enuma Elish, in the Greek myths, Native American myths, you name it, they're all over. Those characters either were gods who had spiritual technology, or were aliens who had physical technology. And you know, people fall on one side of the camp or another depending on how materialistic they are. I am going to, sweetie, I'm podcasting. You can't come in right now. Go spend some time with Mama. Sorry about that. You want to come and say hi? Come and say hi to everybody. Come on. This is my son, Mikhail. Okay. Oh, get in the camera. Whoa, there's Mikhail. Little archangel himself. Okay, now you want to stay here or you want to go to Mama? Okay. Sorry for the interruption there. Yeah, so I'm not going to be landing on either side of that argument. I am going to be telling you the truth that's being used to divide both sides and divide many camps in every which way right now. You can't keep getting on the camera, sweetie. I'm going to have to throw you out pretty soon. He's having fun. Well, as long as it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me. Okay, so in order to kind of dispel that, and with the combination of also giving you kind of a big overview picture of creation, so you'll understand why neither camp is correct, I am going to give you a quick introduction to how creation happened. Okay, so well, let's talk about these Annunaki Elohim. The Anunnaki word comes from the Sumerian tablets. Elohim is the word that's used in the Bible. In the Vedas, they use basically two groups of these spiritual beings, technological beings, one called the Devas and one called the Asuras. And I will tie all those names and all those stories into telling you the truth. Another big piece of what people are talking about now is the Nephelim. If you're not familiar with that term, this comes from the records in many cultures and in all of the scriptural books that have been passed down to us of giant species. Now, some would claim these giants were humanoid. Some claim that they're something else. I'm going to clarify that as well. Okay, but let's back up and talk about how creation started, so you'll have an idea what's really going on. Let me see. Let's switch over to... Okay, so yesterday, if you remember, I introduced the idea of creation being a process that started before anything else was created. And that process happened in quantum consciousness space. If you have ever heard the term quantum, you know that this refers to a category of physical phenomenon that seem to underlie every fundamental thing that's going on in the physical world. So there is a quantum theory that explains electromagnetism and the strong and weak nuclear interactions. They're now arguing over a quantum theory that will explain gravity. That's kind of the holdout, and that's one of the big open issues in science right now. Okay, well, I have to tell you that consciousness is fundamental. The brain does not grow consciousness. Consciousness made brains. And, gosh, I don't know what it takes to prove that to a moronic materialist, because you're constantly creating things that aren't in your brain. Everything you see created around you, your laptop, your iPhone, your tablet, the car you drive, whatever, is a creation. And God didn't make it. Okay? God is not a micromanaging tyrant who makes everything, the master puppeteer. That's nonsense. Anyone who believes that is believing in the adversary, actually, the enemy of God. Okay, so how did that all work? Well, let's talk about early creation. I'm going to skip some chapters here. You can go back in my other podcast to get filled in on the history of pre-history, pre-physical history, because there was a long period of creation that happened before the first virtual reality. And yes, the physical universe is a virtual reality. So are all the other universes, some of which are more obedient to the same laws of the physical universe, and some of which roll their own. That's how you get spiritual phenomena. Paranormal phenomenon are vestiges of other universes playing by different rules. Okay, so let's talk about the Big Bang. That's another huge topic of discussion right now, which I talk about a fair amount, because the evidence you're seeing now from cosmology is proof that the Big Bang was not the beginning and not the end of creation. In fact, it was an intermediate step. But that step all goes back to basically the first virtual realities. And those virtual realities were created thusly. And this is how the 5 principal characters of this creation engine work. Okay? Now, God is the idea man, original idea man, that had the plan of how to make this whole thing happen. And the first version of physical creation was a duoverse, not a universe, a duoverse. Actually, there were effectively 3 universes, because one had already been invented in God's mind. That universe is what separates God's thoughts, his innermost thoughts, from the other thoughts that are participating in his thought experiments. Okay? So you've actually got 2 nested universes within the mind of God. You've got God's private lab, private idea lab, where he can go think of things without everybody rushing to copy what God just thought. I thought about taking a dump. Everybody goes, whoa, God took a dump. Let's go take a dump too. Okay, that's how it was back in those days. So yes, there are sort of 2 nested minds. The bigger mind is this collective of all quantum consciousness, and it is not a hive mind. It's a collection, but not a connected collection. It's free to make up connections. Okay? And those connections tend to follow patterns that are established, patterns that work. The universe is a pattern. It's a container pattern. The purpose of the universe is to keep ideas from spreading before they're baked. Same reason we have an oven, and we try to keep the fumes of the oven in, so if you're cooking something stinky like fish, it doesn't stink up the whole house. There's other purposes of containers too, like an oven, it's to cook something, to build something. A 3D printer is an oven for building material things out of whatever components you put into the 3D printer. Just an extension of any other printer idea, okay? A type of creation. Okay, so the first physical universe was actually quite small. It was a test tube, two test tubes, where God would take ideas that, well, you know, is it better this way or is it better that way? I don't know. They're all the same. One of the ideas that God was playing with was the idea of a proton. Well, gosh, there could be an antiproton too that had the opposite charge. Which one of those is a better idea? Let's put one in one test tube and one in the other test tube and play with it. Maybe we're going to add some more characters to it, like electrons and positrons, photons. Create laws of force, which is essentially implementations of karma at different points of the creation game. Okay, so this is how we proceeded from thought experiments to virtual reality experiments. Because a thought experiment, using one mind, thinking about things, you're going to get to the point where it's like, well, either this is true or this is true. They're both true, or neither is true. I don't know. I got to do another kind of experiment. And all those questions that can't be answered by mathematics or logic get put into the virtual reality, into the physical universe and the anti-universe. This is how it all started. Okay? So the idea and not ideas were thrust in here or here. And sometimes these two characters were just told, okay, you're the proton army, you're the anti-proton army, you're the matter army, you're the antimatter army. This is why the physical universe has predominantly matter and not antimatter. Some ideas were, okay, you both play with this in your own sandbox and see what you come up with. Okay, now this is testing. It's testing of ideas. Okay, and so the difference between Luciferian testing and Lilithian testing, Luciferian testing is to see, does it work like we planned? This is like white box testing that knows how it's supposed to work, how we thought that this creation would be something good, and make sure it does all the good things that it was supposed to and doesn't do bad things that, it wasn't supposed to do. The Lilithian universe was where you did destructive testing, where you take the things that are created and you say, is there a way to break these things that nobody's thought of before? Okay? And this is basically how good and evil developed. Good is developed out of this idea of testing things to make sure they work well, like you expected, and evil comes out of this testing things to try to break them. Now you need to do destructive testing. All corporations do destructive testing on their products before they ship them out the door. Especially hardware products that are not so easy to change as software. But even software undergoes destructive testing. This is like when you're coming out with a new app, you want to not only make sure the app does everything it's supposed to and doesn't have any bugs, you also want to make sure nobody can hack it and make it do something it wasn't intended to and steal users' data or whatever. This is absolutely how creation goes on today. Okay, it's not necessarily evil unless you profiteer from it, unless you make a whole business out of tearing things up and not letting people know about it. Okay, that's the difference between good and evil. That's something you can relate to, no matter what your religion is, or even if you have no religion. It's evil to tear shit up, to take advantage of people and not tell them about it. Do it behind their back. Okay, this is how evil developed. Now, the early versions of these universes were quite small, as I say, basically built upon starting with basic ideas like, okay, let's stick a proton in here, and then let's stick this other idea God had of a photon. Let's put another proton in, because a photon doesn't mean anything without something to observe it and something to emit it. Okay, it's all physics at this point. And this phase of creation was one of an expanding universe of physics ideas. Almost like the perfect physicist, chemist, erector set. And that's how it progressed till the universe was one star. This star, Sol. Actually, the ancestor of this star, because they found out with one star, you can't create elements heavier than lithium, which is not a very good element, as you'll find out, which is why they called it lithium after Lilith. It all makes sense when you tie it together. Okay, at any rate, so the first star was like a failed experiment. This star was a universe that had a lifetime, used up all its hydrogen fuel, and what do we do now? Okay, we need some more characters. Let's invent some more things that could happen here. Let's invent fusion. Oh my goodness, if we make the star massive enough, we can make it big enough that it will get compressed enough to start burning the helium and the lithium into heavier elements. That's a phase 2 star, a second phase of combustion star. Now, that worked only so far, but if you know anything about stellar dynamics, you know that you can't create all the elements that way. You need another star. So the next version was a binary pair. And with that binary pair of stars, you could do all sorts of things. And this is still a very, very common pattern in space now. There are lots of binary stars. There are even binary black holes. There are binary galaxies that have a very regular pattern. They revolve around each other, and they're not too affected by other galaxies because there's not another galaxy that's close enough to have a big effect on it. Okay, binaries are a huge part of creation. And they're why dualism exists. We are not all one. That's absolute nonsense. If everything was all one, none of this would be necessary. We'd all just be sitting there going, everything is perfect and one, I'm telling you, people who believe like that are very low consciousness. They are spiritual NPCs in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so the Big Bang era actually proceeded to the point where we created larger and larger structures until we hit a limit that wasn't going to get solved by physics and chemistry. And that basic limit was the entropy. Anybody that knows anything about physics knows that entropy is like the enemy of the game on a big scale, because as stars use up all their fuel, as the universe expands and expands and expands, eventually there's not a big enough collection of energy to do anything. And the nihilistic scientific view of the universe is that, billions and billions of years from now, all the stars will go out, everything will be brown dwarfs and non-emitting black holes, and there won't be any there won't be any energy or anything to do civilization with, and that's really silly to think that God would ever let the game get to that point. Okay, this is one of the examples that you can give to point out that atheists are essentially Satanists. They are anti-God. They don't believe in God. They don't believe that God had a good idea in doing creation. They think they could do better. Okay, so the truth of the matter was that there were continued versions of this game that developed more and more complex things. And in order to organize these more complex things, the original gods, the gods of the thought universe, got to the point where, this idea is pretty well baked. I don't want to have to go run around being each proton to collect the star that I wanted to build. Let's make protons into AIs. Now, the spirit gods could still go take one proton and say, come here, bud, you're going over this way, and change its direction on a dime. But most of the protons and electrons and neutrons and photons followed set rules. And those rules were based upon quantum probabilities. They were based upon programming stored in the quantum space, the thought space. That's where all the strange properties of everything you know reside. Not in the thing itself. The thing itself is an image, is a projection that is defined by the quantum consciousness program behind it. I can't get you me caca right now, okay? So, once you get into that mindset, then you can kill a lot of the stupid arguments that are going around today. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and get to talking about the creation of the first people, if you will. Okay, now if you think about this era of physics and chemistry and the ability to, if you're one of these spirit creatures, to assemble things the way you want to, even whole stars, okay, this gets you to understanding the elemental age of creation. And at some point, these spirit gods who lived in the heavens and were pushing things around they developed, they said, you know what, let's give a little bit of power to these other things. Let's make stars that can create themselves. Give them a set of laws, basic laws, and let them work within that framework. And that framework has changed. Originally, the first stars were assembled by creative processes. And gradually, star formation and all of these things that we observe and try to describe scientifically became more regular, more directed. And, you know, you could write laws about them. But the reason why science doesn't call things laws, if they're smart, they call them theories. Because every time we start trying to make a law, somebody finds a loophole. Says, well, what about this? This doesn't fit. This is how we went from Newtonian mechanics to Einstein. From the Bohr atom to the Planck atom, or whatever, whoever wants to claim to be the inventor of quantum phenomena. Okay, there are ways of describing behavior that are more or less accurate, that work at different scales. And there are ways of describing behavior that we haven't explained with science yet, and we call that metaphysics. We call them paranormal experiences. Okay? At some point, they gave power to these creations. They actually created, and then they created smaller ones that could distribute that power. Because, I don't want to be a star pulling in all the protons and gathering up all the dust. I want to have little fire elementals to do that work for me, so I can focus on dreaming up what beautiful planets I'm going to get them to put together for me. And this is captured in our mythology. There was a time where the gods, as we thought they were heavenly bodies. The sun, the moon, the planets, our own planet. It's not because it was bullshit. These people were smart. They were smart because they'd been told how creation worked. And they interpreted it kind of within the context of their culture. So, for instance, if somebody gave you a chemistry set, say you were a baby dumped on a abandoned island, desert island, and they gave you a chemistry set, you would learn to use that chemistry set, even though you couldn't read the instructions, or the instructions were not included. You'd find out what was useful, what wasn't, whether you could use it with the other things in your environment. And if you had a little bit of the language to read the instructions, you would then kind of explain what you didn't understand in the terms of the knowledge that had been given you. Okay, this is how things happen to develop things that we would consider people if we're not, narrow-minded humanists. There was an era where the people were elementals. The simplest elementals were discrete things, like fire, actually different kinds of fire. The fire that comes from burning hydrogen, the fire that comes from fusing elements. Those are different kinds of fire. They create energy. They radiate energy. Air is basically the elements that haven't been pulled into collectives yet. These clouds of hydrogen that get gathered up to make stars, those are air elementals. They are acting in a fairly programmed state, bouncing against each other, but they can collectively, if they have a soul empowering them, the gas clouds can join together and pull together and become a star. Now it is a fairly well-defined process. There aren't that many gods that specialize in building stars anymore. It's kind of, you know, passe. That era of creation was kind of boring. Anybody can do that. Although there are human scientists that are trying to make stars in the lab. So there's still an interest in that. And it's still something you can do. Especially if you decide to take your game away from the physical universe and go to one of the spiritual universes, where there are special spiritual universes that are specifically designed for people that like to play with stars. Okay? There are a lot of science universes, there are a lot of art universes, everything you might want to specialize in. Okay, so up to this point, we've gotten to a size of the universe, a Big Bang size of the universe, which, if you know the dating of the Big Bang universe, it's about 13.7 or 8 billion years. Now, in that 13.7 or 8 billion years, a lot of things have been created, but we've never been able to get past that boundary of, okay, it gets this big, and what happens? It's not entropy that takes over. That happens way, way after that, as scientists will tell you. From where we are today till the point at which there's more entropy than there is order is still billions and billions and billions of years away, so you have nothing to worry about. No, what we came up against then was cultural entropy. That is the disorganization that comes from large groups working on things and possibly working at cross purposes. And this is where we bring back in the idea of evil. Okay, at this point, God and the other senior creators worked with pretty much unlimited powers. Okay, they gave limited powers to other demigods, the elemental gods, and the elemental gods together with God came up with the ultimate elemental toy, if you will. That was the first Borg. Okay? Life did not create computers. Life did not create androids, did not create inorganic life. Inorganic life created you. Okay? The first species, if you will, the first chosen species that God said, you know what? I'm going to move to a new phase of the game, because what I'm really after is for everybody to be able to play the game and everybody to be able to earn spiritual power. But these very first ones that I created in my mind, and then I allowed to help me create in the mind outside, my innermost mind, they started turning against me. They started creating ideas that were actually trying to break into my universe. Okay? It's only natural. Kids want to go fuck their parents, right? Who hasn't? That happened before any creation happened. And it's still sort of captured in a lot of the scriptural writings, although most of what we have in our cultural zeitgeist has to do with what happened after we kind of got to this Big Bang stagnation. It's not getting any bigger. We're not making the universe any bigger. People are getting bored with it the way it is. So why make it any bigger? Okay? Making a bigger board for Monopoly and having all the same sort of crap happen, just have more squares on it, is not going to make Monopoly more interesting at some point. People see the trick you're playing on and say, hey, this is just Monopoly with more squares. This is just three-dimensional Monopoly. Yeah, it may get a little bit more complicated, but it's like still the same stupid game. Okay, so this first Borg species was like God's idea to make, the game more extensible, and it did for a while because people started driving around these Borg things and colonizing planets and oh wow, we can get to places now that we couldn't get to before with just we had to go assemble the right elements we wanted. We couldn't bring them there, for instance. If we wanted to have a bunch of gold on a certain planet, we had to go get it, unless you had the power to create it. And not everybody had that power anymore, because that's how the game has been working, in trying to take power away from gods that didn't deserve it. Even God himself. Because power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, at this Borg stage of the game, they were spreading out, and the Borg were created right here on this planet. And this is how other planets in this system were populated by Borgs. And nearby star systems were populated by Borgs too. As God shared his secret for the Borgs, other gods said, oh, I'm going to make a Borg planet in my image, here or there or there. This is how the galaxy, which was all there really was at this point, actually, because we didn't need to make more galaxies till we had exhausted the possibilities of this one. So it wasn't even a big bang yet. It was just a big galaxy. And maybe there was an idea of, okay, there are maybe other galaxies out there, but we haven't found them yet. We need to go explore them. This is how God puts Easter eggs in the game. Other gods do that too. Okay? If you're in a simulation, if you're the creator of the simulation or one of the creators, you can put hints of, okay, we're adding this new realm. You've got to find out how to enter it. And until you enter it, you don't know what's really there. And if you know anything about creating virtual realities, you don't really need to create everything ahead of time. You have some parts that just sort of create themselves out of non-player characters, out of characters that are stored in the Borg. Okay, so we got this galaxy full of Borgs, and God's next trick is I've got my own little special planet here still, where I created the Borg, and then just gave this idea to everybody else. Hey, this is a neat game you can play on your own planets and stuff like that. Knock yourself out. Okay, while they were doing that, God took the next step of, with his favorites, the four, God, Karma, Lucifer, and Lilith, who are now all playing the game at this point, they came together to make DNA. That's why DNA has 4 basic components. I'm stealing a little bit of thunder from the more scientific argument here, but I'll tell you which one of those basic elements came from where and why later. Okay, so DNA was created as a rapid prototyping language for soul vehicles. Because unlike inorganic people, the Borgs, inorganic people, to self-assemble, can only make clones. And they have to gather up all the stuff to replicate to make their clones. And then they have to replicate the programming. Okay, so that's a very limited kind of people. Very programmatic. They have an idea what their goal is, but the Borg are not very smart. In fact, what they want to do is basically assimilate everything into the Borg because they share one hive mind. It's like You've got one mind shared by all the zombies. That's the Borg. They're not the brightest species out there. They serve a purpose. Okay, so the next step was making DNA. Once DNA was made, it was similar to a Borg. It was designed to make self-replicating, not very smart things. The neat thing about that versus the Borg is that DNA, by its nature, has a replication mechanism that automatically evolves. The Borg don't evolve. They know how to assemble the same thing over and over and over again. Well, they will evolve later in the story, but at this point they weren't evolving. Okay, so DNA is a way of taking one soul vehicle, two soul vehicles, or even multiple soul vehicles. There are different types of sex that different DNA creatures have. They can self-replicate, which doesn't mean that they screw themselves, actually. It means that they have basically a mechanism that splits their DNA and pulls in some variant from the memory of the main DNA, so that it creates another copy that's close enough to function just like the original, but has variations so that it can evolve. And this ability to evolve is an important piece of automating creation. Okay, because if we're going to terraform a planet, the planet's guaranteed not to be exactly like the planet that the life was tailored to fit. And all life originally developed on this planet more than 4.5 billion years ago. This was God's private lab. Okay, so DNA was developed and sort of became the competition to the Borg. And some versions of DNA creatures were very much hive-minded. This is obvious in the way that bees and ants and some species of plants operate as a hive mind. Okay, they have one brain that controls them all. That one brain does not reside in any one individual. It resides in quantum consciousness. It is, in fact, one of these old spirit gods, which included the first 5 and many more ideas, God ideas, that were created before the beginning of physical creation. Some of them play for each one of the original gods. Okay? So, basically the team that plays most on God's side are the karma ones and the God ones. The Luciferians tend to play on God's side because they actually want to make progress. They just think they know better than anybody else what progress looks like. And the Lilithians play against God, absolutely. And the Borg, they're kind of dumb, so they play whatever side looks like they're losing. They say, "Oh, let's even up the score." Actually, they tell you that they're being helpful, but actually they are doing their thing, because if the game becomes boring, players want to quit, they assimilate with the Borg. That's what happens if you decide, "I don't want to play this game anymore. I want to go back to source, Mr. Wizard." Yeah, you just gave yourself to the Borg hive mind, for better or worse, and maybe you want to play that way. It's all part of the game. Okay, so we get to the point where the real Big Bang size universe happens, and it happens because somewhere along the line, God decided it was time for other God-level characters to rise to the highest level. So not just the thought gods, but the physical gods could have their own universe to create in. That's when other galaxies started fleshing out. You could maybe see them in the night sky, but it was just a bright light. And you know, we can look at our own history, and at first they thought that those bright lights in the sky were just other stars. They didn't know about galaxies. We still don't know a lot about galaxies, although we've gotten to the point where we can see some structure and we can spot individual stars within galaxies. Okay? This is progress. This, in virtual reality terms, is what is making those things more real. That's the visible part of it, though, because those galaxies have their own gods. Once there is an observation, there is a relationship established. This is what we call quantum entanglement. So that the world of the other galaxy, the other god, can become entangled with this world. Actually, black holes are a kind of universe themselves. They aren't as high a universe as a galaxy. They're still very, very much bound within this galaxy and very dependent on what's going on around it. And you know, that's why black holes can swallow up other black holes and convert into different kinds of black holes depending on their rotational characteristics. Okay? It's all kind of the physical universe is a stacking doll representation of the spiritual universe, the quantum realm. Okay, and there's a representation of everything in every universe, but what gets to play the big characters is different. So in the highest heaven, God's special universe, that hidden space in his brain, that's organized the way God wants to use all of the original souls. Okay? Non-player characters created there are glad to be in God's mind, even if they're only a grain of sand. So if God wants to put in a new golf course in the highest heaven, wow, there's a bunch of new characters that suddenly have to exist in other universes, in other forms. And God doesn't just take any old grain of sand to make his sand traps in his golf course. He takes the best grains of sand who want to see what it's like living in this perfect community in the city of God. And other gods pick out, you know, they take the sloppy seconds, the not quite so perfect ones, and build their golf courses or whatever they want to build in their heaven or hell. The physical universe is still purposed to test. Okay, so it's a universe that everybody visits. All new non-player characters, after they get discarded by God's brain, come to the physical universe in some form, depending on what they earned or what, you know, roll of the dice even. And they will play a game in the Luciferian universe, tested to the limits of what you can test with whatever form they took. Now, a human can be tested in a lot of ways, in a lot of directions. Can be tested physically with disease and congenital defects, with dysfunctional family, with desires that can't be met, with needs that can't be met. That's all a form of testing. What we do with that testing determines what happens next. And these other galaxies, these black holes, in the Big Bang version of the universe, were the heavens. Okay? what we've been doing, well, let me get back in with the Anunnaki thing. Okay, so this gets us to the point where we've got a lot of organic creatures, a lot of Borg creatures. The organic creatures were generating God's favorites. He was choosing certain species to say, hey, you're my chosen species. I'm going to incarnate in your species, teach you how to become gods. And then you can help me to fight against all these other older gods that rebelled against me because they wanted to have independence from the laws I was giving them. Okay, this is what they call the battle in heaven and the battle in the physical realm. It's not the same battle. That the fighters change. The only constants are really God and the adversary. Okay, the adversary is a destructive tester. It was inevitable that the Lilithian soul would develop into a destroyer god. And all of the destroyer gods that we've known in any mythology, in any culture, have been Lilithian. The destroyer god in the Old Testament we call El Shaddai. That means literally the destroyer. That's not God. That's the adversary. That's the one that ordered genocide. And, this kind of leads up to understanding what's going on with this ancient alien story, the Annunaki Elohim. So I will just give you the short version and tell you what's the truth. Way back when, after this planet had been destroyed 4.5 billion years ago by the Lilithian side. At that time, the Lilithians had convinced the Luciferians, the Borg, and even the followers of Karma that God was a bad guy. We got to go kill God. We got to go kill this planet where he's working on perfecting this new species of his, which were the first spiritual humans. Okay, this was that species that we've got here thinking they own this planet, who were beautiful, tall, blonde, blue-eyed people. Now, of that species, many of them played for God. They were the ones that stayed on Earth, stayed loyal to God when the evil ones hiding out in the Pleiades, the seven sisters, they destroyed this planet. This was an evil act. It was done before sex was ever invented. They're called the Seven Sisters now because the adversary is the one that invented sex too. And it was when that non-sex species rediscovered this planet that they realized, oh, this is a great place to go take advantage of the local flora and fauna. And boy, there's these hominids that, they're kind of ugly and they're kind of uncouth, but if we gave them a little bit of brains and stuff, they would make good sex partners. That's the truth about the part in the Bible story about the sons of God coming to Earth and finding the Earth women attractive. They actually found all things on Earth attractive. And this early bunch of Anunnaki bred with both hominids and other animals. This is an age of therianthropes. And these Therian half-breeds had a lot of the spiritual power of the original Anunnaki, who were the descendants of the rebels that had destroyed this planet. It had been so long before, they didn't even remember that Earth was the home planet. They had a vague religion that, like all religions, painted them as the good guys who destroyed God so everybody could have freedom in the galaxy. Okay, that's how they told the story. And after they invented sex, which was invented as a way to infiltrate sexless species and turn them into sexual species, because the adversary thought sex would be a weapon of mass destruction. It will make it harder for the non-sex beings to reproduce and to gain more consciousness. You know, it didn't work for them. Sex became something useful to God eventually. This is how the game has worked. But there have been phases of what's going on, and every Lilithian phase, every time the pendulum swings toward one coalition of the adversary, winning a battle, a spiritual battle against God's forces, they change the history of the previous battles. Just like we know we all do. The winner writes the history, right? And they're trying to rewrite history right now to make it look like, oh, the Indo-European colonial powers were the ones who destroyed everything, and they ruined this wonderful, perfect planet. Well, the truth is, and if you follow Robert Sepper's channel, you'll have gotten a good reminder of it today. He had an excellent segment about one of the oldest members of the oldest and most pristine tribes telling their most secret history about how light-skinned, light-eyed people once lived among them very peacefully. But before that, there was a period where there were these red-headed giants who they fought with. Okay, what I'm here to tell you, though, is war and love go together. If you know anything about ancient pagan religions, you will know that the love goddess was also a war goddess in every culture. Now, some of them would de-emphasize it or make them into two separate goddesses or three goddesses to try to diffuse the connection. But the gods and goddesses who were evil were either Lilithian or Luciferian Satanists. They oppose God. They don't want the Messiah to come back. And they played tag team games. Oh, you win for a while now, and we'll wipe out, we'll let you wipe out all our useful idiots. And then, when their population is down to what we want them to be, then we'll win for a while and we'll wipe out all your useful idiots. And we'll keep the powers balanced, and we'll look for signs that a new species or a new people has become anointed by karma and God. Because this is how the Messiah system works. Okay? Royal bloodlines were anointed at one time. Human history has been a story of basically God and karma trying to bring together just the right DNA to reassemble this perfect creature that was destroyed 4.5 billion years ago before God could introduce it to the galaxy. They were deathly afraid of this new species because it was like, oh, they're going to replace us. God loves them more than he loves me. This is the same bullshit that has been played for so long. And they got everybody together against God and said, let's destroy that planet and God too, and we'll take over. And that's what they did. Of course, they couldn't destroy God, but what they did was, after they destroyed it, they said, well, we'll let you put this planet back together, but we're going to give you rules you have to do it by. And you're going to have to play by the same rules as everybody else. I.e., you're going to have to experience death, reincarnation, and the judgment of karma. Because you told us that this new creature had the best karma version of any you ever created. That this was going to be the one who would solve this battle problem. We didn't believe you. We destroyed your planet. You're going to have to prove it by using this new system you created, this karma system, to learn and grow and become God again. That's what's been happening for 4.5 billion years. And God has been trying to wake up to full consciousness, only getting so far. Some of the forms in which God has woken up were not all that great characters. They were more like one or the other of his children. The Buddha Borg, the too much loving version of karma, Mother Mary or Jesus, the authoritarian Luciferian God, Yahweh, the Lilithian gods, El Shaddai, Kali, Shiva, the destroyers. Those were sometimes incarnations of God who got corrupted. And so there are bloodlines that represent all of these different styles and have been fighting amongst each other, trying to raise a new Messiah in their own image. Okay, the Luciferian religions want to have a conquering Messiah that's going to wipe everybody out and make them join together in the one perfect religion. And the Lilithian messiahs are divisive. They want to create a bunch of hive mind cults that think my one is better than anybody else's, and we're going to force it on you. We're going to assimilate you. We're going to control your minds and make you join us. The Borgian gods just want everybody to get along together. We're all equal. We're all good. Don't worry. This is just a fantasy. We'll take you to our nirvana when it's all over. And in the meantime, just peace out. And the karmic gods are, trying to do what they think is going to really bring the Messiah. There are godly characters in this system, and I'm going to tell you how those come about. When DNA mixes, okay, there have been avatars of God, Karma, Borg, Lilith, and Lucifer coming all throughout history. And you can kind of spot the character types if you look closely at some of the famous characters of history, and to say, oh, okay, that was a God Messiah, that was a Karma Messiah, that was a Borg Messiah. Okay, they all have something to offer in this plan, but until they get assembled a better version of God, that's not going to advance the game. And ultimately, the big advancement would come from getting past this period of cultural entropy. And there have been advancing progress in cultural entropy that solve the problem culturally, but haven't been a big enough solution to release that solution from the lab. The lab is this planet, this solar system. Okay, we do experiments in smaller labs than just whole universes. This is a mini universe, and there are boundaries in it, and we're finding out that, you know, the Oort cloud is just part of the story of this strange system we're in. There's actually a structure beyond the Oort cloud that is a boundary of sorts. This is the boundary of this experiment. And for much of the experiment, the access through that boundary was very limited. So only high-powered spiritual or high-powered technical characters could get through, because there's two kinds of technology. There's spiritual technology that uses power from the quantum realm, and there's physical technology that uses stuff that works because of the laws of physics and chemistry, at least up to the limits that quantum phenomena take over. Okay, this is what has kept this experiment isolated, controlled for so long. During that rebuilding phase, the detritus from the collision that destroyed this planet, that left the asteroid belt, was reformed into the Earth we know today and the Moon, which have some very, very odd synchronicities and patterns in their setup. It's not normal for a planet to have only one moon, one big moon, if you will. It's not normal for a planet to have eclipses, both solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, that are total at times. That is an incredibly precise alignment. It is a fine tuning that cannot be explained by any random process. I'm sorry, materialist scientists, you are fucking stupid. It was created. It was created for a reason. All of these synchronicities, the precession of the equinoxes, the collections of stars that we name constellations, that was all planned. It was a setup. It was a setup that God created after they destroyed his favorite planet. He did it in a different way than he'd done before, okay? He planted ideas, not finished plans. He gave inspirations, not told you to go do this, go do that. Take your people here, take your people there. Go kill all these people. That's not God. God doesn't work like that anymore. He learned his lesson. He works very subtly when he's awake, and often hasn't been awake, has been incarnated in, oh my God, how many different forms during the reforming of this planet. Every creature that grew up on this planet has been God at one point or another. Those were all the anointed species that became the permanent characters in the board. The non-player character collection can be pruned. We can delete bosses whose boss battles are just a pain in the friggin' ass. Now, if you play video games, you know there's some video games that most players just kind of turn off on when they get to a certain level, because the boss battles get so hard, it just becomes really frustrating and annoying, and you just don't want to play it anymore. Okay? That's a game whose designers thought like Borg. Okay? They're going to make it so hard nobody could possibly win my game, and that's how I'm going to show I'm the best game designer ever. They're thinking a Borg way or a Lilithian way. They're actually more Lilithian thinkers because they're trying to destroy the minds, and that maybe is good. Destroying the desire to play video games could be a good thing, couldn't it? Because it's going to make the kid want to go out and catch up on his chores, mow the lawn, and do his homework. So to some extent, that could be a useful character, and that's the whole point of Borg. We keep all the stock characters there, good guys, bad guys, indifferent guys, in case they might be useful. And the Lilithian characters are the ones that we haven't found a use for you yet. You're just plain destructive. And so when they get wiped out, when they get killed, when they get converted, when demons are exorcised from souls, they're moving more towards the Borg. They're going to become stock characters. So the Beast Abyss is really not what you think it might be. It's not so much punishment. It's just like, we're going to erase you and keep your character handy in case we need it, and your soul is going to get to go inhabit a non-player character of some other form somewhere. Okay, that's what happens when you say, I want to go to Nirvana, Mr. Wizard. I don't want my ego. I want to join the one. I want to go back to Source. Well, okay, if you did such a bad job of playing the game, maybe that's the thing you want to do, but it's not enlightenment. It's like giving up all your experience, all of your memories, and starting over in what might be the lowest form of soul vehicle there is. A lonely hydrogen, a lonely proton running through space, or a lonely photon running through space on a pre-programmed mission that might lead nowhere. Vast majority of those who go to Nirvana, that's what's going to happen to you. Because you've got to earn the attention of the better gods. You've got to earn God's attention if you want to be a god. That's the whole purpose of the highest heaven. The highest heaven, the lowest hell, and the physical universe are the three most important destinations. Not destinations, but way stops for souls. Okay? Most souls will maybe just bounce around between physical incarnation and heaven or hell incarnations grown out of this process. If you play the game well, you'll play your game going to afterlives in independent, conscientiously creative God universes. You'll get to go to art school with the gods, or science class with the gods who invented science, who invented the laws, and understand them in detail from a spiritual basis. If you're fantasy inclined, yeah, there's universes where you can go be part of a hive mind. You can be an ant and be directed by the great ant god to go fight the orcs. Those are fantasy universes, and they're nice for, some of them are pretty nice for R&R. You have a really tough incarnation. I want to go to Middle Earth for a while, and I want to be an orc this time. Okay, you can do that for a while if you have a pass. Sometimes souls will take up permanent residence there, and there is a Middle Earth there are actually a bunch of Middle-earth heavens and hells, depending on what character you like to play. How narcissistic you are, how sadistic you are, how masochistic you are. Okay, and that whole tribe of universes grew out of the god Tolkien. Yeah, Tolkien's the god now. He died. He's got a great idea that engaged a lot of minds, engaged them in a sort of a new religion of the Tolkien universe, which is actually a family of universes, right? It has to be, because there's a lot of different stories you could play there, depending on whether you want the orcs to win or you want the hobbits to win, or who's, okay. That's what the multiverse is all about. Anything we've ever imagined exists or existed at one time. Well, how long it exists is how long that thought can be sustained. And this, maybe let's talk about the whole Tolkien universe for a change, for a while. The stories of the three main books and The Hobbit are basically all most people know about Tolkien. They're the popular stories. Tolkien wrote a lot of other things, and he spent basically most of his older days trying to come up with sort of an overview that would encompass the whole history of Middle-earth, which all the ideas originated in these less popular traditions that had been replaced by the world's main religions. Tolkien used as his source material, I mean, you have to understand the era that he grew up in is this era from, pre-World War I to post-World War II. People had, we're not doing the right thing here. If Christianity was the bee's knees, or Islam, or Hinduism, or Buddhism, or communism, or capitalism, we took a wrong turn somewhere. So Tolkien's idea was basically, well, maybe we missed something. He looked earlier at some of the older traditions, pulled out ideas that we hadn't used for a long time, that were maybe unpopular, ideas that conceived of characters developing godlike characteristics. This is what the whole story of Frodo was about. This little nobody hobbit gets this mission to take this ring and dump it in Mount Mordor, wherever it is, and somehow through that process becomes an almost god character. That's what made that so popular. That's what made role-playing game, because Dungeons and Dragons was grown out of the Tolkien universe. Science fiction universes are the same. Popular science fiction stories make new universes. Not all of them are ever going to make sense in physical terms. My favorite science fiction author in my younger years was Isaac Asimov, who was a very materialistic scientist who thought, there's got to be some story that could explain the march of history. And he wrote 3 trilogies of books to try to form the basis of that. One, the I, Robot trilogy, which was very much close to this time. The Galactic Empire trilogy, which was like pretty far out, and then the Foundation series, which was way far out. And if you read his whole series of books throughout this genre, he eventually got to the conclusion that no, humans didn't create themselves, didn't emerge out of something random. They were actually a project of androids from the far future who wanted to create a species worth serving. Pretty close to the truth. And this ties into explaining the other conflicting piece of human culture right now is this whole idea of disclosure and who are the aliens, where are they from, are they demonic, are they multidimensional, are from the future, etc. The answers to everything is yes. The most important skill you'll ever develop in life is the improv skill they call yes and. Okay? The idea is whatever you're getting from somebody else, you say, okay, I'll take that, and then I'll add to it. Exactly the opposite of what you're being told to do with critical thinking. Critical thinking is a cultural Marxist idea. Critical means you already have a strong opinion. That's the worst thing. That's the whole reason we've got reincarnation and amnesia. If you have such a strong opinion, you're never going to change. And that's why eventually God had to incarnate himself. Keep incarnating until better versions of God emerged. And those better versions moved time out, the time to cultural entropy. Okay, the time of the Anunnaki, whenever it first was, I think they say that the first evidence of modern humans was about 300 to 400,000 years ago, but there was also seemed to be some kind of a change around 1 million to 3 million years ago. I mean, it's hard to track, right? That represented one of the critical points where the adversary was going to win and make the game boring, make the game painful, make it so painful that nobody wanted to play, and they all chose to return to the source. I want to go to Nirvana, I don't want to play this game anymore. That represents a win for the adversary. Okay, and wherever that demarcation point is from people being happy and excited to play the game to, I hate this game, I'm not going to play it anymore. That special time is when you need a Messiah. Of some sort, to get you past that point, to get you playing a different game. Sometimes the game has been, okay, this species has just made this planet a pain in the ass for everybody else to live on. We need to wipe them out. And we'll let a Lilithian Messiah come and tell you, you need to commit genocide on all the giants, because they're the bad guys. Well, all the giants weren't the bad guys. There was a lot of evil done. The Nephilim were not all bad, evil giants that wanted to kill everybody. They were just the descendants of species that had devolved because of the influence of the adversary. Humanity is devolving now. You can see it. Every generation gets stupider and more gullible and more easy to program. That didn't just start with TV, folks. It started even with the printing press. Dual-use technology. You make things too easy and people get bored and lazy and they stop learning. They take things for granted. The whole history of humanity has been trying to move the goalposts of this transition from cultural blossoming to cultural entropy further and further. the holy grail of it all is not just having a Messiah, but it's creating the cultural environment that maximizes the number of little messiahs, the little gods of arts, crafts, entertainment, science, but do so in a responsible way that's not destructive. Okay? Hollywood started out trying to create positive things, trying to reinforce American culture, because Hollywood was in the United States. It was very patriotic back then, rightly so. There were filmmaking centers elsewhere. Most people don't realize that Germany was a very prominent filmmaking center before World War II. For better or worse. Again, it's how things change. Every species on this planet has been chosen at one time or another because they were the right vehicle for moving the story forward, for making the story interesting again, for cutting off elements that were destructive. How do you destroy a culture? You make it stagnant. You make it brittle. You make it inflexible. One global supply chain. We need to have one universal religion that everybody can agree to. It's nonsense. It's bullshit. All you're doing is making people angry. You're feeding a bunch of bullshit, oneness nonsense that everybody can see is making humanity worse. It's making us more irritable. It's making us more violent. It's making us more narcissistic, more, lazy. All of these bad things. We got to stop doing that. It's time for a real big Messiah. And you already not doing what you think he's doing, because you all have your own narrow-minded point of view of what your Messiah would be like. Well, that's fine, because each of you has your own Messiah mission. That's what's so special about this time. Every single flipping human being on the planet has something that they were meant to do, and they're going to do, because this whole scenario, this special generation, was known ahead of time in the mind of God. But God wasn't there. That was the old version of the mind of God, the non-player character version, the AI version. And the planning, the active planning, was done by all the other gods that were in heaven. Daddy, how are we going to wake him up? They kept making more plans. And some of the plans were like, well, we don't really want to wake him up. Let's go destroy this. Okay, that's how we found out some of those old gods that were up in the divine council were actually traitors. They were bootlicking traitors, like, a lot of people sucking up to the Chinese Communist Party right now, sucking up to the World Economic Forum. Okay? It's a sting operation we're in right now, folks. Because we've raised enough little M messiahs and made enough little gods within the chosen species, human gods, with human minds, going to overcome these evil minds that have been trying to keep us back for so long. And the Messiah is already ready, sitting in the wings, waiting for the big event, because he doesn't know what the finale is going to be. He knows why he was born and how he woke up to full consciousness to figure out this whole plan. And that 2025 is the start of the age of Aquarius, is that magic year that is one zodiac sign after Pisces, which didn't start in 0 AD. It started in 135 BC was the magic date. Trying to make their own version of the apocalypse. And yes, there have been evil people who thought they were doing good by trying to bring on the apocalypse. That's essentially what was up with the 1666 anti-Messiah Sabbatai Zevi, who, if you haven't heard of, you need to go over to Robert Sepper's channel and look at his content on the esoteric origins of communism and Zionism. Because those are both groups of people who had an idea what the apocalypse was going to be, and they're going to make it happen. It's like the Laverne and Shirleys of the well, I talk about it elsewhere, but I'm going to tell you, Jerusalem is not the holy city. It has been a holy city, but it was a holy city for Yahweh, who was a Luciferian god, until the Ark of the Covenant was stolen back by the Egyptians, taken back to Egypt in 971 BC. And it was made into a city of the adversary that actually worshipped El Shaddai, the destroyer, during the reigns of the Davidic monarchy. Solomon was no great, wonderful, wise king. He consorted with These weren't godly characters. They were destructive characters. The God that ordered genocide on neighboring tribes because they worshiped different gods than you, not because they were sinful, not because they practiced human sacrifice or ate their babies or had sex with young girls. No, just because they worshiped different gods. The truth is, many cultures had a sense of the old way of El Elyon, who is mentioned in the Bible. The blessed time mentioned in the Bible was the time of Salem, which is not Jerusalem. Hive have crept into culture since then. So while it was a pretty good version, it was ultimately quite a Luciferian version. Moses' inspirations as a great prophet were from Lucifer, the god of the physical universe, who's normally on God's side when he hasn't been corrupted by his sister Lilith. Okay, the laws that were given to Moses Okay? They're very hard to understand because we all know there's times when you do need to kill. You got to kill to eat. You got to kill plants at least. You sometimes need to kill to defend your family, to defend your country, to defend your way of life. That's not karma's laws. Karma's laws are spiritual laws. The Ten Commandments are good laws and they're true laws. But look at the first two. Thou shalt have no other God before me. If you're a Luciferian, you worship Lucifer. Backlash against the Bible. Rightfully so. If you worship the destroyer El Shaddai, you're even worse because you're worshiping the adversary that sees anything but that's different than what you believe and wants to attack it. Not understand it. Not see, okay, well I see that's good. I'm not sure if that's good. That might be destructive. This is what I do as an omnist. Omnism is not the same as panpsychism. It's not the same as scientism. There are a lot of bullshit artists calling what they preach omnism. Omnism is looking at all sides objectively and without coming up with a better thesis than you had before. I've been doing that for 5 years, well, almost 6, 7 years now, since my big spiritual acceleration. And I've been in a lot of places in my life. I was raised Presbyterian in a small city in Idaho by parents who were second generation Dutch and first generation French. And my mom was a very, very ardent Catholic. Even though she went to the Presbyterian church, she lived and died a Catholic. That's what she believed. I lived I had my atheist phase. I had my material scientism phase. I went through my cosmic oneness phase. I've seen these different perspectives, okay? And I'm telling you what is the synthesis of all of them that has come out, and I cannot find a hole in it. And believe me, I know how to find holes. That seems to be the point of my life. Every place I've been, every step on my journey, I've been the one to learn about a particular subject and say, hey, wait a minute, Mr. Wizard, what about this? That was my whole corporate career. Being the one guy who would stand up and say, this doesn't make any sense. Didn't make me a popular person in my corporate career. Took up an interest in acting. It was like the great, oh man, why didn't I find this before? I had this hidden talent to be an actor and was really good at it. So good that, within a few years I was teaching acting. And it allowed me to study deeply human nature, much more deeply than you'll get out of studying psychology or psychiatry or social science or any of the other things that are accepted ways of learning about human nature. Acting is the best way to learn. Improv is the best way to learn how to be an omnist. Yes, and don't just reject everything that somebody says. Say, okay, that might be true. Now I've got The stuff that, well, you know what? I haven't found a fit for that in my universe yet. Let's keep on looking. If you do that, you will find that there is nothing that I've said today or I said in any of my podcasts that you can poke holes in with real facts, with things that aren't just your own assumptions. Okay? If you start from the assumption that material, matter and energy are everything, and consciousness was created by those, bam! You made a wrong assumption. Period. If you start from the assumption that, well, God is everything, universe, bang! Wrong assumption. I can prove you wrong. You can prove yourself wrong. You don't want to, and you may throw stones at my content because you have your chosen religion already. I don't give a flying flip. Doesn't matter. You choose your gods. I'm telling you, there are a lot of gods, but there is only one first creator. There's only one Lucifer, the best Lucifer ever, which actually is the Archangel Michael, whose descendant you just got to meet a little while ago, my little Archangel Michael. There is only one best version of karma. Karma's a little different though. Karma is kind of of the latest karma version that we have encountered. Okay? The best version of karma is kind of like I would describe, if you've ever seen Pinocchio, the cricket, Jiminy Cricket, who's following Pinocchio around trying to tell him, hey, might be a good idea to do this, but doesn't push him, doesn't stop him, says, but just follows along, trying to give him good advice. This is your karma. This is your conscience. And you have to learn to listen to it, and it has to learn to listen to you. Because nobody knows you better than yourself. But you're not going to discover yourself until you interact. Karmic soul. If you let yourself be conquered by a hive mind, by the Borg, become a Borgish soul is like the one that, it's all good, everything's a good idea, you can just do whatever you want, everybody makes their own truth. That's a Borg. No judgment is bad, okay? If you put people that have no judgment on a judge's bench, like George Soros has been doing in the US, they make bad decisions. They throw criminals out on the street. They reward people for torching stores, rioting, being a public nuisance. That's bad judgment, isn't it? Atheist hive minds are, and there are atheist hive minds. There is a hive mind of people that are so convinced that we can answer everything with science that they believe we have no free will. That is an adversary hive mind. And there are gods of that hive mind, the messiahs of that hive mind. I forget. Robert Sapolsky, come on down. You are a Lilithian messiah. You're preaching absolute anti-God nonsense, destructive, divisive nonsense that you should know is not true. We do have free will. You got to understand it in the context of the simulation universe, though. Simulation. One more time. Let's go take a look at what the soul's Merkaba looks like. Oops, I got to go back to a different slide. Okay, so the Merkaba you can view two different ways. You can view it as 3 tetrahedrons which have a variable orientation, variable size. They're not necessarily all right tetrahedrons. They have their own shape that are freely forming a complex, vibrating, rotating that is you. Those tetrahedrons represent 3 kinds of experience. 4 dimensions represent, you just let me go, you just get Mama help right now. 4 dimensions are physical experience, what happens in the physical universe when we're incarnated there. 4 are dimensions of what we've experienced in spiritual universes. Whatever heavens or hells we've been to between lives. And we may have attended a lot of them. Early in a soul's life, they tend to make a lot of mistakes. They get to go to a lot of hells, get a lot of 12-step program treatment. That's basically what the better hells are like, is a 12-step program for are you, what you have experienced in your own universe that you're not aware of yet. Okay, when we exert free will in the physical universe, we may be experiencing what we do there if it is consistent with the plan. If it's not, then that action will be taken in the spiritual universe that you're a representative of, so that their plan gets activated, or they think it gets activated. And this is how, some of the namby-pamby gods can kind of get confused, because they see their own religion. Just like people in the physical world see the world through a lens that's not necessarily the truth. Okay, if you do something that's really your decision, that is kind of defying the physical universe and defying your spiritual home, that is what makes the strongest impression on who you are, this central layers of your Merkaba. And the Merkaba is kind of like a cell in structure. These layers being the innermost 4 layers, being the you, your core. These are the experiences, these are the choices I made. This is how I observed the reality I experienced throughout the course. The next 4 layers are, okay, this is what I experienced in spiritual universes that may not be my reality, may be somebody else's reality that they mapped on me. And then the outermost layers, which I didn't show you the final state here, is more like this. Or maybe, no, here we go. This is a fully formed Merkaba. So you've got the final 4 layers that represent what happened in the physical universe, the physical reality. And your soul, when you have your own universe, when you are aware of this innermost one, will see, okay, I did wrong, that were really my decisions. There's things in this area that I did wrong or right that were driven on me by some god or goddess or collective that I was worshiping at the time. And then this outermost, well, these are things I may have done because that was a character I chose to play in the physical universe. And the physical universe is a set scenario. It's planned in the mind of God. We know who all the characters are going to be. The planners know who the Messiah is going to be. They knew how the big Messiah or the little Messiahs and all of the events that need to happen. And they make sure that happens. But they give you the freedom to choose and have those occur somewhere else. Had, and I'm telling you the only possible answer. Now, once your Macabre is fully formed and you become a level 12 god of whatever happens to be your specialty, then you're able to know when you're being influenced by a hive mind cult. You can see, oh, now I see what the evil ones are trying to make me do or trying to do to people that are in my universe. And you can choose to play for the bad guys and say, yeah, let's go get them. Or you can choose to play for God. It's a choice, always. God isn't going to force you to do anything. God is not almighty. Better actor, better anything. But you will, because God can't do everything. I've always wondered why I seem to be a jack of all trades, master of none. Everything I turn to, I'm really good at, but I get bored with. Until I started being the Messiah, and I haven't gotten bored with that yet, so who knows, maybe I need to be sacrificed soon. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Oh my goodness, I should have looked back at the screen. You haven't been able to see anything I've been talking about, have you? Or have you? I don't know. At any rate, I closed. Tell you whatever you want to do.